I still feel like a fake because, there's still those voices that kind of whisper in your ear that you're not enough. Who are you? And I've thought many times, who am I to be publishing? I don't have a degree in publishing. My degree is in journalism. What do I know? Um, and I have struggled with this topic for a long time. And for a number of years, I thought it was just me, that I was the only one, that that nobody else could have felt like this. That it's just me and the reason that I feel this way is because I am so inadequate. And it's just a matter of time before somebody figures out that I don't have a clue what I'm doing. And slowly the Lord's been working with me over the last few years and said, you know what? I called you to this. I called you for a reason. Let's get at this. And so as I go around to these different conferences, I talk to other writers. I've talked to some major writers about this thing called imposter syndrome, and how often do they struggle with it too. And I have found that it isn't just me, that it is something that a lot of people struggle with, primarily women, funny enough, and especially people that are a bit perfectionist in nature. We tend to have this imposter syndrome. Just to give you a definition of what it is, it's actually feelings of inadequacy or being a fraud, a chronic self-doubt that plagues us and at times keeps us from doing what God has called us to do. Now, if that sounds familiar, then you too may be struggling with imposter syndrome. The study suggests that about 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their career or at some point in their life. They'll experience imposter syndrome, which is a huge percentage. And it's not something we necessarily talk a whole lot about. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it today, because I see a lot of Christians who are missing the boat that God has called them to get on, the things that he has called them to do, because they are too afraid. They're afraid that they're not enough, that they don't have the right experience. God, you got it wrong. We need to overcome that so that we can start being everything that he has called us to be. So some of the lies that the enemy whispers in our ear with this one is, everyone around me can see that I'm a fake. Everybody around me can see that I'm a fake. And I would have to say, no, they don't see that because they're too busy worrying about themselves. They're not watching you. They're not paying that close attention. They are too worried about themselves. Another one is, I don't deserve to be here. Well, if you didn't deserve to be there, then God wouldn't have put you there. Another one is, truly successful people don't feel this way. Oh, yes, they do. I've talked to a bunch of them. A bunch of successful people feel this exact same way that we do. And another lie is that it's just a matter of time before someone discovers the fake that you are. The truth is that the truth is God's truth, not man's truth. It's not my truth. It's not your truth. The truth is God's truth. And according to Beth Moore, she says, Beth says, God's truth is not perception. It's not what God discerns, but the best that he can recall, this is the way it is. No, God's truth is God's truth. And you need to know that God's truth is way more powerful to free you than your truth is to keep you in bondage. His truth is way more powerful to free you than your truth is to keep you in bondage. And I found that quote to be incredibly insightful. The truth is, the enemy doesn't want you to feel anything but inadequate. What better way to keep you from doing what God has called you to do than to make you feel like you have no business being there or doing that very thing that he's called you to do. And so thankfully, God has given us a number of ways and examples in the Bible to help us crush the enemy's assault on us. And we're going to go over those few things here. First solution to this problem is to know who you are. You were created by God. Jeremiah 1:5 says, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations. God was talking to Jeremiah at the time, but the truth is he knew us. If he knew Jeremiah before he formed him in his mother's womb, he knew us too before we were formed in our mother's womb. And he had a plan. He had set Jeremiah aside for a specific purpose. And he has set us aside for a specific purpose. There is something that he is calling you to do, something that he has set you aside for, and he wants you to accomplish. And so you were created by him, and you were given that purpose. The next thing is, under know who you are would be you are a child of God. John 1:12 says, but to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. Now, that means that you are special to him and that you have a special role. He's created you. You are his child. And your creator calls you his masterpiece. In Ephesians 2:10, he says, for we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. So he's created us. He knew us before we were even created. And then he created us, made us his child, and he's given us this job, and he's made us perfectly. He sees us as a masterpiece. He has made us perfectly to do exactly what he's called us to do. He created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. He created us specifically to do those things. So, and then you're also knowing who you are called. Romans 8:28 says, as we know, and we know, that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. So you're not an accident. You're not a fake. You are the called according to his purpose. You're one of those called according to his purpose. And he's working everything to get together for the good of you. So know who you are. That's solution number one. Solution number two is you are not alone. We're going to take a look real quick at a Bible story that you heard about, I'm sure, in Sunday school. But I want to take a new look at it. It's out of Exodus. If you've got your Bible, you can open it up to Exodus chapter 3. And we're going to be taking a look at Moses and the burning bush. I think we have time that I can read this for you. So one day Moses was tending the flock of his father, I'm in verse 1, of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it did not burn up. That's amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses. Here I am, Moses replied. Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people of Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It's a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivitites, and Jebusites now lived. I hope I said those all correctly. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt. Now, okay, so Moses has met God on a mountain. He's seen him in a fiery bush, a bush that isn't consumed. And God has told him what is his calling. He doesn't even have to guess what his calling is. You and I have to guess. We have to figure it out. We have to pray about it. We have to kind of discern what our calling is. Moses had it all laid out for him. Go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people, Israel, out of Egypt. And so what does Moses do? Moses. This is one of the giants of the Old Testament. This guy was, in the end, God called him his friend. Okay? What is the first thing that Moses does? Moses says, but Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people out of Egypt? So Moses has been given the directive directly. He knows exactly what he's supposed to do. God has called him verbally out to do this. And Moses comes up with not one or two or three excuses. In the end, he comes up with 5 of them. He comes up with 5 excuses not to go do what he says. I think this guy has a serious case of imposter syndrome, because he says, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? And God answers him and says, I will be with you, and this is your sign that I'm the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. But Moses protested. If I go to the people of Israel and tell them the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? What should I tell them? So God answers him again and gives him an answer. Then Moses complains again, protests again, and says, what if they won't believe me or listen to me? What if they say the Lord never appeared to you? And God answers him again. And then Moses pleads with the Lord, oh Lord, I am not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now. Even though you have spoken to me, I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled. Then the Lord asked Moses, who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you in what to say. Now you would think that that would be enough. But no. Moses took one more shot at it and said, but Moses again pleaded, Lord, please send anyone else. God called Moses, and he was reluctant to do what he was called to do. He would have a million excuses to not do what God called him to do. And the truth is, so do you. And so do I. Some of our excuses might be, I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough experience. I've never done this before. You don't know my history. You don't know what I've done. What are people going to say? This is crazy. We are so quick to talk ourselves out of things. We're so quick to talk ourselves out of what God is telling us we need to do. But God doesn't need your excuses. He needs your obedience. He needs my obedience. We read verse 11 and 12 again. The Lord asked Moses, who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you in what to say. Now, Moses wasn't the only one to deal with this problem. In the Bible, I kind of did a little bit of thinking through my Bible story lessons in elementary school, in Sunday school, and I came up with a few others that I think may have dealt with imposter syndrome a bit, and I have a feeling there's a lot more. I'm just not remembering them off the top of my head. But first, there's Gideon. Remember Gideon? He was the guy that God called to attack. I don't remember who the people were, but he was supposed to take, he called first, 10,000 people, and then God had him whittle it down to 1,000 and ended up with 100 people that he used in this attack. But before all of that started, as God was calling him to do this, he was like, I need a sign, Lord. I need a sign. I need you to show me that this is really what I was supposed to do. And he did that several times. Jeremiah tried to say he couldn't speak and then complained over and over again about the people not listening to his message. And then there's the Apostle Paul, which he ended up writing as many as 13 of the New Testament books. And he had a colorful history before he became a believer. And there was a time when he was actually sent home by the apostles back to Tarshish, and he spent 3 years there building tents. And I have to wonder if there was a little bit of imposter syndrome going on there. He just didn't feel like he was ready. So we're not the only ones that have dealt with this. Many of the Bible characters that we know and love, the people of the Old Testament, dealt with this too. And just know that, keep that in the back of your mind, that you're not alone in this. The third solution, the third trick to fixing this problem is to go back in time. Revisit your history with God. There's chance, when you sit and you think about all that God has done for you over the history of your life, all the little ways that he has come through, how could he be any less faithful to carry you through this next one? There's a verse in the New Testament, I think it's in 2 Timothy. I want to say 2 Timothy 3:16, but I could be wrong on that. But it says in that, it's one of my favorite verses. Actually, it's 2:15, I think. It says that God is faithful even when we are not, because it is who he is. He's not able to go against who he is. He's faithful, and he will carry you through whatever he has called you to do, just like he carried you before. An example in this one is out of 1 Samuel, and I didn't mark it in my book, so that this might take me a little time to find. No, here we go. 1 Samuel chapter 30, verses 1-6. And in this, David is facing the Amalekites. The Amalekites have captured some of his people, carried off the women and children, and David's just not quite sure what to do. And I want to see if you catch this as to how he deals with this. He says in verse 1, chapter 30 of 1 Samuel, it says, 3 days later, when David and his men arrived home at their town of Ziklag, they found that the Amalekites had made a raid into the Negev and Ziklag. They had crushed Ziklag and burned it to the ground. And they had carried off the women and children and everyone else, but without killing anyone. So they captured everybody, but they didn't kill them. When David and his men saw the ruins and realized what had happened to their families, they wept until they could weep no more. David's 2 wives, I can't pronounce it, Ahinoam and from Jezreel, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal from Carmel, were among those captured. David was now in great danger because all his men were very bitter about losing their sons and daughters, and they began to talk of stoning him. But David found strength in the Lord his God. Now, how would he have found that strength? What would he have done to find the strength in the Lord his God? I have a feeling that he went through his history with God, and he saw all of the different times that God had not only saved him, but had emboldened him, had lifted him up. I mean, think about, he had David, the battle with Goliath that he had in his history. He had being called in the first place, the youngest of several sons of Jesse, and David was called out as the youngest one of all those to be the new king. He had obviously killed a bear and a lion when he was tending sheep as a younger man. There was a history there between him and God, and he remembered what God had done for him in the past, and it helped him to find strength in the Lord his God. So go back in time and revisit your history. If you can't remember it right now, that is fine. I would encourage you to come up with to start a journal. Start some sort of a list that you can keep on your phone. I have some notes on my phone that I keep, and when I think of one, I type it in there and remind myself. And then when I'm feeling down, I pull that list up and I go through and I look at all the things that he has done for me. And what an amazing morale booster that one is. And it keeps me going. It reminds me, no, he's put me here. He's put me here for a reason, and I'm going to I'm going to follow through on this. So I would encourage you to do that. Look back in your history with God and how he's come through for you in the past. And then I would encourage you to update your internal dialogue. Instead of, I can't do this, I can't do that, I don't know what I'm doing, I can't do that, I would say, I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. Philippians 4:13. Instead of, I don't know what I'm doing, how about, keep on asking and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking and you will find. Keep on knocking and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks, receive. Everyone who seeks, finds. And everyone who knocks on the door will be opened. It's out of Matthew 7:7 and 8. Or how about, I'm the only one who feels this way. Well, history merely repeats itself. It's all been done before. Nothing under the sun is truly new. Or as I think there's a song that says there's nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes 1:9. Chances are there's some scripture that can help you with your internal dialogue, to help you change that dialogue to something that's more positive and something that God can use to encourage you to rethink this idea of being an imposter. And then this one's kind of an easy thing. Well, I should say it's easy to say. I don't know that it's so easy to do, but just keep reminding yourself, don't compare yourself to anybody else. They have the same issues you do. They, they have the same insecurities. They have the same, doubts about themselves. They're just better at covering it up on Instagram. So just stop comparing yourself to anybody else. The only one that needs to be satisfied with what you're doing is God. That is the only person you need to worry about, is what God thinks, not man. So I'm going to wrap this up. We're a little bit ahead, but maybe we can sit and do some discussion afterwards here. But I wanted to just wrap this up by saying, the enemy cannot take your calling. He can only attack your confidence. Romans 11:29 says, for God's gift and his call can never be withdrawn. God's not going to change his mind about what he's called you to do. If he's called you, that calling is still there, whether or not you do it. So it's still there. What it is that he's called you to do is still there, waiting for you to pick it up and start doing it. He hasn't changed his mind. One other thing that helps me is that, to remember is that the onus is not on you. God has called you. He has to equip you, and he will. That's his job. He's the one that's calling you. He is the one that will equip you to be able to do what he has called you to do. The biblical reference on that one is 2 Corinthians 3:4-6. We are confident of all this because our great trust is in God through Christ. It is not what we think we are qualified to do. Is that right? It's not that we think we are qualified to do anything on our own. Sorry, got to read the verse right. Our qualification comes from God. And he's enabled us to be the ministers of this new covenant. So that's out of 2 Corinthians 3:4-6. We're not confident in all of this because of our great trust. We are confident of all of this because of our great trust in God through Christ. It is not that we think we are qualified to do anything on our own. Our qualification comes from God. He has enabled us to be ministers of his new covenant. And then Stephen Furtick of Elevation Church says it this way: make your peace with your weaknesses. God's love and calling don't depend on your perfection. That is so true. He doesn't need you to be perfect. He created you exactly the way he needs you. He will equip you. It's not about faking it. It's not about being anything about other than who you are. It's about being authentic to yourself and allowing Christ to work through you to use you. So there we go. We finished 9 minutes early. Does anybody have any questions? Take yourself off mute if you want to talk about anything.
Tammy, can you repeat that last thing that you said, make your peace with your weaknesses? What was the rest of that?
It's Stephen Furtick of Elevation Church. It's a quote from him. It says, make your peace with your weaknesses. God's love and calling don't depend upon your perfection.
That's very good.
Yeah, I thought so too. I did too. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, who said that?
Stephen Furtick, F-E, oh, how do you spell? Oh, no, I'm sorry, F-U-R-T-I-C-K.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tammy,
Yeah.
I just want to say it's so wonderful to hear you teach.
Oh, thank you, Carla. I appreciate that.
I'm going to come back.
Yeah, maybe.
I think the interesting thing for me is the absolute opposite of Jeremiah. And when I was first called back into ministry at the age of 69, my feeling was, who in the world does this at 69? And how can I be effective ministering to women at 69? And the Lord used that same passage in Jeremiah. You know, he said, don't use your youth as an excuse. He said, don't use your maturity as an excuse.
Exactly. Exactly.
Blessing in so many ways, because I can connect with the younger women. I've been there, and I can connect with the older women because I'm at least kind of relatable to them. Right. So, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, he uses us. I mean, he's put you there for a reason. I know I've said that over and over and over today, but he has put you in that position for a very specific reason, and
so it's also
not going to leave you stranded.